It's the Newport This Week video podcast. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Remember, you can find all of our episodes at newportthisweek.com or go ahead and subscribe to the Newport This Week YouTube channel. That's where you'll find this podcast and a lot of other great local content. Right now, one of the major local stories on Aquidneck Island that's been developing in a lot of different directions over a period of time here is the potential regionalization of Middletown and Newport public schools, a pretty significant and in some cases to some observers' minds, surprising development here as Middletown has unanimously voted to continue, let's call it pursuing the possibility of regionalization. Councilor Charlie Roberts of Middletown joins us today to give us a little bit more insight into the thinking there. Charlie, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Executive summary, what does this actually mean in practical terms?
Well, I think we basically, as a council, we decided, we took the input from the school committee. We had a special meeting with them in advance at the beginning of the month, and I think we just all agreed that with the vote, as you see there, that we should at least have a conversation. Let's sit down, have a conversation with Newport, have a conversation with Ride, and see what our options are here, if any.
And what options are, in terms of the discussion right now, what are the options? Because I think a lot of people see it as really there's two options. One is the schools regionalized, option A. Option B is the schools continue as separate districts. What else is at play here even from the nitty-gritty standpoint of how this would operate?
I think, there's definitely even opportunities if, say, regionalization doesn't go forward. I think the two communities could really help each other out here a lot with opportunities for our students. That's what I'm about with this. I want this to be, and a lot of other people have spoken about this. They want it centered on the students, and it should be. But the only way to answer all these questions that are still outstanding is to first sit down and talk. And I'm glad that we've decided to do that in Middletown.
When you say sit down and talk, is that more so between the different parties here? Which, look, there are a lot of different parties at play. I think it's important to outline that it's not just simply the two councils. It's not simply the school committees. This is something that I think there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and there's also going to be, of course, a state piece anytime regionalization turns. I think a good example would be Chariho or Pontiac, and the process is there, albeit they didn't happen this century. They're still informative in terms of the best practices and the processes. So who needs to be in discussion here? Is it a conversation between councils? Is it a conversation between councilors and voters? Where's the communication most essential right now?
I think to start, we're going to get together with the Newport City Council. So it's just going to be the town council and the city council, and what I believe will be an open meeting. And we will talk about, the options. What do we both want out of this as communities as well? I don't know if we'll get into exact details. That's something that I think this working group, this academic advisory working group, would really that would be their task, and they would work through all the details of how the voting would work, financials would work, and everything. But to start, we're going to have the city councilors of Newport and the town councilor of Middletown sit down in an open meeting and have some discussions.
What do you think the average Middletown resident feels in terms of their desire to either move towards regionalization or maybe not? Let me rephrase that because average may not be the right word. What are you hearing from residents in terms of an appetite for regionalization versus continuing on as separate districts from the city of Newport?
I think it's close, and which is why I think it's not the same as it was in 2022. The 2022 Newport voters Middletown voters overwhelmingly supported regionalization. And it wouldn't our starting point is kind of similar. The framework for that is very similar that we would start with here. But there are a lot of questions, more particularly about how much reimbursement we can actually get from RIDE. I think everyone can understand the academic benefits for this for the children, and we'll get to that point. Eventually, we have to answer those questions. That has to be at the forefront. But for right now, I think this is a good step. We had a very heated meeting with the school committee here, I would say. They did their right. They had their right to make that vote, and they did. We just want to have the conversation and see where this can go going forward.
What other districts have you been looking at in terms of and I'm not even necessarily talking about Rhode Island, but is there an analog to what a Newport Middletown regional school district might look like somewhere else in the country where this process has been a bit slow? There's been a difference in appetite for this in the different communities. Is there anything that you're using as kind of a rubric to assess this on your end from a initial sustainability standpoint and so on and so forth?
Me personally, I'm actually looking outside of Rhode Island.
Mhm.
I think what we have a tendency to do here in Rhode Island, and in many cases New England, we're so town centric, and we just want to remain that way. So our only examples of regionalization, in some cases, people talk about negatively, like the Bristol Warren district. I don't know. I haven't gotten into the full details on that, to be honest with you. But I do see other ones out there in the state that are working quite well. But I look outside of Rhode Island because I think there's a lot of success stories about regionalization of school districts. I come from an area in upstate New York where everything was at the county level, everything. And it took a lot of burden off of taxpayers locally, and it also provided better services, I think, to the community.
Yeah. Sometimes it's interesting when we think about ourselves as compared with, say, New Hampshire, where they have a county level government. And look, you can make the argument. Nick Gorham, former state legislator out in Western Rhode Island, he proposed merging towns like Coventry, Situate, and West Greenwich would become a town. I can't remember. He made up an interesting name for it. And a lot of people laughed him out of the building, but it was no laughing matter because when you take a look at city services, when you take a look at the school districts involved, it's one, it's benefits the taxpayer. Two, it benefits, probably most importantly, it benefits the students or those receiving services. The problem ended up being provincial attitudes in Western Rhode Island. It's no different on Aquidneck Island. Do you think that from a provincial attitude standpoint, can people get past the idea that, you know what, Middletown, the blue and white versus Rogers, the red and black, eh, they might not be competing anymore in volleyball, but they're going to have better schools. Can people get past that idea?
I hope so. And I won't fault people, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of pride in your town. I take a lot of pride in our town, but I
Sure.
also know I'm part of a bigger community here. And I've said this all along, like it's always the adults in the room that mess this up. And our kids are already regionalizing so many activities on this island. It's not even funny. So, I hope people do. But again, we listened to the school committee. They had some real reasons for not wanting to move forward, and we listen to them, and that's what my point is. Like, we can't answer the questions that are still outstanding. And the same thing with our citizens. Like, there's going to be a lot of questions, and we got to get those answers for them.
Yeah. Charlie Roberts, Middletown Council. Hey, we'll keep an eye on this one. I mean, obviously it's a major conversation. I feel like anywhere I go in Newport or Middletown, I mean, it's a little bit of an exaggeration to say that I walk into a place and someone approaches me about this. That's not true, but it is not uncommon to go to Empire, get a coffee, and have someone say, "Hey, saw a podcast on this," and offer an opinion unsolicited, meaning it's a hot button topic. Appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you.